Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door NetAdmin. It's time for the March Freeform. And this one might be a little bit more of a freeform than usual, being the last two, because I have thoughts on what to talk about, but not in detail. So we're just going to go on a little bit of a journey together, all right? My thought on what to talk about today is professional jealousy. This is something that I have to deal with because I suffer it every now and then. And I'm not entirely sure how to deal with it gracefully. It can be dealt with easily enough, but gracefully, that's the tricky part. So first, what is professional jealousy? Well, in my case, professional jealousy is generally about, oh, hey, this is a thing, this is an area of expertise that I have, and it's kind of my thing. It's what I do. It's my thing. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy being the subject matter expert. And somebody else starts doing things their way. Okay. Well, on the one hand, my way isn't the only correct way. I do not have some sort of monopoly on being right. That's just not a thing. But I also usually have some reasons for why I do things the way I do. And if somebody else has good reasons that I've overlooked, generally speaking, I want to hear them. If I'm the one who's doing things dumb, tell me about it. I want to fix that. But in the middle space, in the in-between, as it were, it's really something that I start feeling, I can't say for everybody else, but I start feeling, that's my expertise. That's my thing. That's what I'm good at. Why are you barging in on what I'm good at? How do you deal with that? To some extent, I think part of it is just talking about, okay, so why are you doing this? Are there technical reasons for that? Here are technical reasons that I have for the process that I follow. Can we have a discussion about this? Sometimes people are open to that. Sometimes they are not. So then where does that leave you? Sometimes that leaves you with, well, somebody else has to make the decision on which path we're taking. Whether that's a manager, owner of the company, something. To some extent, it gets a little easier the longer you spend in your role, the more expertise you have accumulated, and the more of a track record you have, lends your reasoning a little more weight. But this is the world of technology. Everything is always changing. The things that you have done for 10 years, and as a network admin, I have done things for upwards of 10 years. The things you've done for the last decade might not be good enough anymore. There might now be a better way of doing things. And you can look at something and go, that hasn't been around for long enough. I don't trust that. Okay. I've talked before about how sysadmins and netadmins prize stability over always chasing the newest thing. Yes, that is still true. But sometimes something comes along and you go, this is objectively better. And maybe I don't wait 3-5 years before I start to implement this. If there is a security concern, has it come from somebody whose other work and expertise is well known, well respected, etc.? there may be valid reasons to implement it sooner, start rolling it out, change the standard. But again, how do you figure that out? It's always a little bit of a battle. And I cannot say that I always deal with it gracefully. There have been times when people have, taken over things that I considered part of my thing. It's funny how we get possessive about things. It's, on the one hand, I understand what it comes from. It's kind of just who we are as people. And on the other hand, I kind of laugh and go, there's a lot more things that you could stress about than just, oh, somebody's taking over my thing. Standards, though. How do we come up with standards? How do we, here's a $20 word, how do we promulgate those standards? And I probably screwed up the pronunciation, so apologies. It's an open question. So, professional jealousy, if I come back to that, how do we avoid it? There are some approaches that I have noticed cause me personally more difficulties than others. What are those two approaches, or two examples of approaches that could be taken? We'll go with that. Well, first, let's talk about what happens if you have no standards whatsoever. If you have no standards whatsoever, a company that is full of technicians, people who consider, oh, I know how to, configure a desktop, I should be able to configure a server. Or people that go, if it's not complaining, then it must work right. Even if it doesn't look good, it should work okay. There are some people like this. They consider themselves system administrators or network administrators. If you have a company that is full of these people because you are a tech services company, what happens when everybody in the company decides to configure the company's infrastructure in their own fashion? Mass chaos. That's what happens. Everybody logs into the server and everybody says, oh, well, somebody else did this wrong. I'm going to change this. Something new breaks. The next person to log in goes, oh, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, changes it and does something different. You never have a consistent working system. The only consistency you have is it broke. And how it's broke today is different from how it was broke yesterday. It's just still broke. This is what happens without standards. People add their own equipment to the network. Okay, maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. Like, oh, I set up this server, to do things on the network. Okay, but we already had one of those. Why did you set up another one? Oh, because I like mine better. Okay, well, how about we improve the existing one instead of just setting up a second one? You start having people pulling different things from two different servers, you're going to get different results. And that's not consistent. Then it goes out to the customer and you end up with, well, which deployment did they get? Was it the one that we know about because it's the official one? Or is it some new homebrew thing that somebody just slapped down on the network because they liked it better? This is what happens without standards. So when you have a standard put in place, there's a couple different ways that you can move forward from that. The first method is for people to just go, I think this is out of date. I'm going to do my own thing without telling anybody else. I'm just going to do it, and it'll be better. And I'm going to do everything I do in this way, which is different from standard, because it's better because I say so. That tends to make me feel like I'm being pushed out. There's no discussion. There's no feedback. There's no, hey, I thought of doing this. Have we considered this? Are there reasons why we're not doing this? If somebody comes to me with that, I'm happy to go, here are the reasons that I've thought through, and there's usually at least 3 or 4 of them. Here's all the reasons that I've thought about. Here's the alternatives that I've already looked at. And this is how I balanced these competing priorities, shall we say, to try and come up with a workable solution that will generally work for everybody. This is an open exchange of information. Maybe I have the expertise here and I will tell you how I came to that decision. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to listen when somebody says, here's something new. And I was reading this and I was looking at this, and here are the things that I think would be useful. I'm open to that, or I try to be open to that. So if there isn't that free, interchange of ideas and thoughts and analysis, then it makes me feel like I'm being pushed out. Sometimes it's not intentional. There are times that people go, oh yeah, no, I did this and I deployed this to like 3 different sites and I never thought to, discuss it with the person whose responsibility it is to make sure it all works. Okay, well, that's a thing that happens. I get that it wasn't intentional. It's like, come on, it would have been nice if you had thought about it, but I get it. No big deal. Let's move on, have a discussion, move forward. And sometimes that has meant, hey, okay, so this is a new system. All right. There have been times where I don't know for a fact whether it was intentional or not. It feels intentional, but it could easily not have been. Let's take, for an example, we started moving forward on a new wireless system. I was asked to evaluate it on a technical basis. I couldn't. I wasn't given a login to the system. And I wasn't given a login to the system for 5 months. In that time, somebody else who did have a login to the system moved forward with it. Then I find out, yeah, we're deploying it all across a major client and we're moving forward with it. The contract's already signed. The decision's already been made. And by the time I actually start being able to look at it, well, it can't do this, which is kind of necessary. It can't do this. It can't do this. We're on version 10 or whatever of this software, and it still can't do basic enterprise networking. This is not good. From a network admin's perspective, it's not complete. It's not suited. But it's too late at that point. The contract's already been signed. We're going forward with it. Okay. And because we're going forward with it, who are we going with? We're going with the person who's been working with it for 5 months and has become the new wireless expert in this new system that we're deploying, because the netadmin wasn't given access to even look at anything for 5 months, 6 months, however many months it was. Okay, you can go back 5 months afterwards and go, oh, you never had access to that? Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that. I thought it was already done. No, it was never done. Can I say, okay, I can see how this kind of a mix-up might happen. We're all super busy. Yes, absolutely, I can see that. Inside, you're going, that's awfully convenient. Awfully convenient to have the person who has been asked to evaluate this new system, awfully convenient that the person whose responsibility that is has been prevented from carrying it out. And now there's a new expert, and now there's somebody else who's handling that entire subject matter. Okay, I have been replaced. So the moving forward with just doing something new without telling the person whose responsibility it is one way of moving forward. There's another way of moving your standards forward and evolving them over the years, which is, the word I want to use here is more of mentorship, which I consider a more positive way of doing this, which is, hey, happy to give training. Somebody wants to learn how to deploy a server. Random act. Okay, deploy a server. Come watch me deploy a server. I will explain literally every step I'm taking. I will talk for hours as we go through this process step by step. I'll tell you about why we're doing the things we do, what alternatives exist to the process that's being taken, and all of the various considerations of the circumstances under which you might want to do something different, or you might want to stick with the existing process. I will tell you all of that happily. And then you do that a couple times. Then people go, okay, I'd like to deploy one myself. Go for it. And then they go, but I'd like you to double check my work after I'm done. And if I've missed something, please tell me what I've missed. Happy to do that. 100% happy to do that. Configure the system. Excellent. And I'll happily review it, offer you any thoughts on things that I go, oh, hey, I saw you did this. Is this what you meant to do? If so, what was the reasoning behind it? Because maybe you know something that I've missed. Or maybe I'm picking up something that you've missed. I'm trying not to make any assumptions here about who's right or who's wrong. It's entirely possible I've missed something. It's entirely possible that you've missed something. So let's talk about it and figure out what's the way that we want to go forward with this. It might be exactly as you've configured it. I don't know. This is why I want to understand why it's been done that way. And as you keep doing that through the years, it becomes, yes, I trust this person knows what they're doing, even if they don't configure it exactly the way that I would have. I understand the kinds of inputs they're putting into their decision-making process. I understand that they're thinking of it in a way that makes rational sense and isn't going to cause us any nasty surprises down the road because something broke when it shouldn't have. And as you communicate those standards, as you mentor somebody in that, I find that even if I end up being replaced in a particular function, there's a lot less chance of professional jealousy there. And part of that is simply because if I'm mentoring somebody, they're my mentee. I am directly invested in growing your knowledge. I am directly invested in making sure that you have all the capabilities necessary to take over from me. And it's not like I'm going to just go away and be thrown out. I'm going to be doing something different myself. We all learn, we all grow, we all move on to different roles and responsibilities as we go. That's part of life. I just want to be able to pass it on reliably. And it's a way, way different feeling from just somebody going, oh, you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing without asking anybody. I'm going to deploy a server. And I look at it and I go, you've deployed a server with 2056 megabytes of RAM. That's not an even number. That's not a standard number. It should be 2048, not 2056. Why is it 2056? I don't know. I haven't asked the person who deployed it because they get offended if I question their decisions. But I don't understand it. Even if you go, well, 8 megabytes of this is going to be taken up by video memory. I don't know. I'm guessing maybe that's what it is. You go, okay, but this is a virtual machine. Every actual server is going to have 2 to some power of 10 RAM. If it's 2 to the 20, that's 2048, excuse me. 2048, that's 2 gigabytes of RAM. What computer do you know of that you install RAM and go, oh yes, you have 2 gigabytes and 8 megabytes? Doesn't exist. The computer's not set up for that. And you go, well, it's going to take 8 megs of memory for the video memory, so that leaves an even 2 gigabytes for the operating system. Okay, I understand your logic, but that's not how the CPU handles things. It leads to inefficient performance because you're not following the construction or even the emulated construction that the virtual machine is going to follow. This is something that I could tell them. This is something maybe they already know and don't care about. I don't know. But then later they come and say, well, I didn't know there was a standard. You never asked. And even when you ask, I see people doing things on their own all the time. Here's a server with 8,000 megabytes of RAM. Is that 8 gigabytes? No. 8 gigabytes would be 8192. 8,000 megabytes is a random number. It's not going to have good performance because people aren't paying attention to what they're doing. They're like, oh, well, I just set it up like this. That's not useful. You can have people saying, oh, yes, absolutely. This is a brand new Windows 2022 system. And you look at it and you're like, it's none of the screenshots you're showing me are a new Windows 2022 system. They go, oh, actually, this is the old Windows 2012 system. I'm sorry. There's a mile of difference between Windows 2012 and Windows 2022. And it's not just a slip of the keyboard either, because you said this was a brand new installation. And then you turn around and say, oh, actually, this is the old installation. I could understand if somebody fat fingers the keyboard and says 2022 instead of 2012. I don't understand if you say it's a brand new 2022 installation, then turn around and says, oh, well, actually, I'm showing you things from the old 2012 system. That's a basic thing that you really should catch. Either you know what you're feeding me and you're deliberately feeding me misinformation, or you're not even paying attention. I don't know how I got talking about this. I rabbit trailed. I'm so very sorry. But that's kind of what happens in a freeform. I start talking about one thing and we end up talking about something completely different. But this has gone on for a reasonable period of time. So I'll just stick a pin in that for now and say thank you very much for listening. I am happy to continue talking with everybody. Kind of a one-sided conversation, I know, but you're welcome to leave me comments. You're welcome to give me feedback. I have actually gotten some feedback. offline and said, hey, I'd really like to learn about Acme certificates, the Acme protocol. How do we work with certificates? I'm going to talk about that starting next month in April. Not next week. Pay attention to the date next week, and you'll know why I'm not talking about anything serious. But yeah, we're going to start talking about Acme certificates, and if you have things that you would like to learn about, if you have questions, if you have anything that you're curious what a network administrator thinks about it, let me know. So thank you very much for watching. I am your next door netadmin. We'll see you later.